Prabhupada will lead us in. Following that will be our guest speaker, His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj, also one of Prabhupada's first disciples. He'll speak for about 30-40 minutes, about till 7:30 or so. And then we'll have another short kirtan live here in the room, followed by prasad. Okay, that's how it'll go. It's bound to be a very wonderful evening, so I'm really pleased to see you all here. Satguru Maharaj writes, 26 Second Avenue is a unique pilgrimage site among all temples, outreach centers, and country farms within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada arrived in the U.S. in September of 1965, and for almost an entire year he received very little response, living as a guest in the home of Dr. Mishra in uptown Manhattan. Eventually a student found him a rented storefront on the Lower East Side, and when he moved there, his first serious students started regularly attending his kirtans and lectures. In September of 1966, on the day of Janmashtami, Srila Prabhupada initiated his first American disciples. And soon after, working with a lawyer, he officially incorporated the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, as a tax-exempt religious corporation. The Swami was very accessible to his disciples. From the first day of his arrival in the U.S., Prabhupada continued wearing his saffron sannyas dress and rubber pointy shoes. He lectured in this very storefront in the evenings of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, he stayed in his apartment, sitting at a low desk and conversing informally, answering questions from the devotees crowded in the room. Srila Prabhupada loved the 1966 period. Even at the end of his life in 1977 in Vrindavan, he reminisced about the time at 26 Second Avenue. He recalled, "Those were happy days. We were like a close family. All the devotees of ISKCON have a feeling of heartfelt gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for coming to 26 Second Avenue and starting the Krishna Consciousness movement. Devotees should make a point of visiting the first ISKCON temple and take part in the weekly programs that are going on now." So let us go back to that time in 1966 when Prabhupada recorded in this room the kirtan we're about to hear.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप धाम की जय। समवेत भक्तवृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gautmanam.
I've taken to closing here quicker. Okay, so, welcome. We're, I think, all fairly well acquainted with our guest speaker today. It's always a privilege to have His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj here. Whenever he's in town, he comes on Wednesday nights to share his memories and reflections and realizations on Srila Prabhupada, particularly in the early days, and speaking about the devotees who were here at that time. It's always an enriching experience, so we always look forward to him being here. He goes back to having been initiated in 1968, and is particularly known for a lot of things, particularly known for his editorial work. He had a hand in, I think, all of Prabhupada's books, editing, etc. He was the head of Back to Godhead magazine for a long time, involvement in the BBT, so many things. And these days he travels a great deal and is an author of acclaimed books, still writing. And I could say that he has a keen eye on preserving what Prabhupada gave us and trying to do his best to preserve what Prabhupada gave us as Prabhupada gave it to us. So for that we are very grateful. Please welcome His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sarivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Shahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhopyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Are you sitting on a cushion, Prabhuji? You have to sit on a cushion at least, or I'll be unhappy. Better. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. I thought this evening I would talk a little bit about stuff that we say paraphernalia, we never say stuff. Paraphernalia associated with Srila Prabhupada here at 26 2nd Avenue. I'm sure Satsrup Maharaj would have a much longer list and more to say, but at least I'll bring up a few items, which of course requires the phone. Very interesting, this phone just erased everything that I put in it. How about that? Unreliable electronics. Okay, we shall now speak without benefit of the list. Starting with Srila Prabhupada's apartment, one item of his that's, I think, been mentioned often is his sitting place with, which I remember as being sort of grayish, a sort of a bedspread sort of a thing, with gray elephants, maybe gray, anyway, elephants on the border. And Satsrup Maharaj mentioned his low desk. Actually, his low desk was a piece of tin luggage. Here we don't find tin luggage very much. In India you may sometimes find it. Basically a box with a a latch.
They call them trunks, right, Maharaj?
They call them trunks.
In Indian.
Yeah, you could call them trunks, I guess, but a trunk is usually, I think of a trunk as something big.
Yeah.
This was a box. A trunk is a big box. About the size of the tabletop, and maybe yay high, and yellow, painted yellow. And that was Prabhupada's desk. At some point it came into my possession, and I gave it to Rupanuga Prabhu. After that I can't trace it any further. Among another item, it may have been in the box, I don't remember, but there was a small can, like 2/3 the height of this maybe, of a bottle. It would have been a bottle of Eaton's ink eradicator. Those who, no one will remember, but it came in a bottle, and the bottle came in a kind of there'd be a round base, metal base, in which the bottle would sit, and then there'd be a cover the size of the bottle, also of metal, round. So you had this little cylinder, essentially, and Prabhupada kept coins in it. I suppose coins that randomly came into, or one way or another came into his possession, he was keeping in this little red, cylinder, because all the coins were Krishna's property. If you looked straight across from Prabhupada, if you were sitting in Prabhupada's sitting place, which you wouldn't be, but if you were, then facing you would be a closet in Prabhupada's room. And in the closet, here's what I remember seeing. There were some tapes, recording tapes, which back in the day were about kind of like that. They would come in boxes. They'd be on reels, and they'd come in boxes. And there were several of them in Prabhupada's room, labeled according to the verse that he was speaking on. I remember one was Evam Pravartitam Chakram, and there were some others, just indicating what the subject matter was. And Prabhupada had kept those particular tapes. Also in that closet, I remember seeing several typewriters. Of course, a typewriter itself now is an ancient machine, but Prabhupada's typewriters were ancient even in those days. They would be, first of all, electric typewriters were sort of the standard, were pretty common back then. Not ubiquitous, but common. And these, of course, were manual typewriters, and old manual typewriters. Manufacturers like Underwood and Royal, and they would have keys with maybe this much travel on them. And Prabhupada would type with 2 fingers. He was a 2-finger typist. So he had 2 or 3 of them. It seems to me that they may not all have worked. In fact, I don't know if any of them were really in good condition. But he had them, and they were, I would have thought, valuable for his work. Again, I can't comment on their functionality.
Did these typewriters come with him from India, or were they acquired?
I don't know. I wouldn't think Indian, but I doubt Indian because it would have been mentioned that Prabhupada came with a typewriter. It would have been a notable item. More likely acquired here, I would have thought, and not purchased, I wouldn't have thought either. Later, of course, the story is famous how Gargamuni Prabhu discovered the dictating machine, often called a dictaphone, including by Prabhupada himself, but actually a Grundig recording machine. Grundig was a manufacturer located in Long Island, if I recall.
German.
Excuse me?
German. Grundig was German.
I know that, but they were located in Long Island. Their office in manufacturing, in fact, I think, was in Long Island. And then there were on the floor of the closet, there were some big bundles, what we call guthries, right? Is that what you would call them? Big bundles of saffron cloth with manuscripts in them. And especially what I remember was second canto. There might have been a little of third canto, I don't recall, but mainly second canto. I don't recall if there were any Bhagavad Gita manuscripts. Somehow I don't really think so. But there were definitely second canto Bhagavatam manuscripts wrapped up in these saffron bundles. And Hayagriva relates, in fact, that when he told Prabhupada that he could type, then Prabhupada said, yes, we have a lot of typing for you to do. And disclosed these bundles of manuscripts. Of course, there would have been mustard oil. Srila Prabhupada daily took his massage with mustard oil. There are different kinds of oil and different kinds used commonly in different parts of India. South India, you'll find more coconut oil, sometimes sesame oil. But in Bengal, it's always mustard oil. Just as in Italy, the life of Italy is olive oil. Olive oil for cooking, olive oil for you name it. So in Bengal, it's mustard oil. In fact, it's mentioned, I think, that someone, maybe it was Shivananda Sen, would bring the Bengali devotees, would bring mustard oil for the Bengali devotees, because it's just a requirement, mustard oil. And Prabhupada would take massage with mustard oil and with some camphor in the mustard oil. And mustard oil is quite hot, quite heating, so it's not to be used for the head. So for his head, Prabhupada would use a little sandal oil, which would be in these little silver-colored metallic containers, maybe this big. They're still around. You still see those sandalwood. So Prabhupada would have a little sandalwood oil, just a little bit for the head, because sandalwood is very cooling. Sandalwood oil. Yes. There was a tape recorder. It was for some time kept right around where this record player or this table was. And quite a good one. I forget which brand. Reel to reel, of course, about a vertical affair with the reel going this way. But it was stolen one time. And Prabhupada remarked, he said, therefore I never allowed it to be kept downstairs, meaning in the storefront, because it was a valuable thing, and it was stolen. Prabhupada's cane, of course, would be there. And there were some other things some of Prabhupada's clothing. Prabhupada had, you see sometimes pictures, he's wearing turtleneck shirts. Kurtas may or may not have been always available. So you'd see the picture, he's wearing turtleneck shirts. I remember maroonish, like that. And he also had a shirt that was like a cowboy shirt. You know, the pockets that have little pearl things and a little zigzaggy. And Govindasi one time remarked, he said, "Oh, Swamiji, you look just like a cowboy." Prabhupada said, "I am also a cowboy." Prabhupada had a black and white heavy coat. You may have seen the pictures of that. That also came into my possession for a while I was at ISKCON Press. I had it. But when ISKCON Press moved to Los Angeles, then Santosh Prabhu begged it off me. And after all, heavy coats are not needed in Los Angeles. Not that I would wear it, because it was actually quite large. And it's questionable whether one should use the paraphernalia of the spiritual master. Generally, no. And his shoes, definitely not. But there's counter evidence also, Uddhava says in Bhagavatam, that mentions being blessed by being able to use the paraphernalia of the Lord that he'd already used. But Prabhupada in his will, in fact, said, I believe it's his will, that after my departure, no one should live in my apartment. So there's a kind of significance, if you're using his paraphernalia or you're using especially his sitting place, no one should ever use the sitting place of the spiritual master. Or you're using his apartment. And it signifies that perhaps you think you're on the same level as he. And that's disastrous. So Srila Prabhupada explicitly directed, I believe it's in his will, or else it's in another document he drafted, perhaps direction of management or something, that after my departure, no one should live in my apartment. He also, by the way, before his departure, ordered that all his stationery be destroyed. Someone starts writing on your stationery and perhaps introducing into the court, this is a document written by Bhaktivedanta Swami on his own stationery, in his own forged handwriting, and so on. So he had his letterhead destroyed. Of course, Prabhupada wore spectacles, not always, but reading glasses. I don't know if I've told the story before. I've heard from my godbrother Hansadutta that when he came to the storefront the first time, he was very impressed by seeing Srila Prabhupada. He thought that, he was obviously a spiritual figure. He looked something like Lord Buddha, with long earlobes and effulgent presence and grave and so on. And then Prabhupada was leading kirtans, so that, as you've heard, that transcendental sound is very powerful. And then after the kirtan, Prabhupada put the Bhagavatam before him, and Prabhupada took out his glasses to read the Bhagavatam. And Hansatuta thought, well, what's this? He's a Swami, why does he need glasses? Because the Swami obviously is transcendental to material conditions. He shouldn't need glasses. So what is this? This is of course, our mundane estimation. We think that a Swami his perfection is that he somehow transcends all physical needs, and therefore glasses should be out of the question. Hearing aids would be a no-go, and even shoes are something to question. So this is, of course, mundane vision. The real thing is how the spiritual master is engaged in Krishna's service and spreading Krishna's message. But, and of course, Hansatuta got past that and joined the Hare Krishna movement. But he told that story. Prabhupada's cane, of course, was another part of his stuff, his paraphernalia. In the Nectar of Devotion, it's mentioned about Krishna's paraphernalia, that it serves as his paraphernalia serve as impetuses for love for Krishna. Krishna's buffalo horn, Krishna's flute, Krishna's peacock feather, Krishna's this, Krishna's that, his ankle bells, all the different paraphernalia related to Krishna, in one sense is not different from Krishna. If the king is coming, then he's not going to leave his crown at home. The king means his crown, his other items of, well, if he were in the court, his scepter, if he's the King of England, and so on. And all of these things impress, yes, this is the king. So for a while there was I don't think the pretense is still continued, but the President of the United States had what was like a football with him, football-shaped device that was provided the always available hotline to Moscow, so that in the event of that we were approaching the brink of nuclear war, this communication could be there. Or wait a second, was it that, or was it actually the device by which you could launch the nuclear weapons? I forget. Perhaps it was that. In any case, this always traveled with the president. So that would be part of his paraphernalia. It was also fraudulent, by the way. For only one person to have the authority to launch nuclear weapons is out of the question, because then obviously all the enemy has to do is destroy that one person, and your country goes down the drain. And therefore, many people have the authority, not huge numbers, but multiple people have the authority to launch atomic weapons. This is all tangential to our subject this evening, and we won't go further, except perhaps to mark that, just see the difference between the paraphernalia of modern politicians and the paraphernalia of Krishna's devotee, pure devotee. Prabhupada had, of course, his tilak ball. that's perhaps worth remarking on. Prabhupada would have a ball of round, yes, a ball, not a stick, of tilak, usually about yay big, and it would not have perfume. The modern Gopi Chandan that one picks up usually is smelly. It has a scent added to it, but Srila Prabhupada, his tilak did not. Nor, by the way, did he have a stamp or mold as part of his paraphernalia. These days, sometimes you see that people have a sort of tilak stamp, and use that to apply tilak. But Srila Prabhupada didn't. He did it with his, There's in fact a set of pictures. Have you seen those pictures where Prabhupada's showing how to make tilak? Yeah. Step by step. One time I went up to his room in 26 up in the back and offered obeisances, and Prabhupada said, "Where is your tilak?" And I asked him a very honest question at the time, whether, I'd put the tilak on earlier in the day. Now it had worn off. So the question was whether this was something that you just apply once and it's done, or whether it should always be there. And Prabhupada said it should always be there. But that reflects the state of our knowledge. Is this just a ritual that you do? You put on tilak and you're done? We didn't know. But Prabhupada said, no, it should always be there. And he expected us to have tilak and not to have beers. Although some did. Ayagriva Prabhu and Ray Rama also for some time had beards. Various devotees did. In the storefront, I don't remember anyone who's having a beard except sometimes Ray Rama. And Ayagriva kept a beard for quite some years. And at one point he visited Prabhupada in Europe, and he had a surprise for, he was at that time I think even a member of the GBC. Anyway, he had a surprise for Srila Prabhupada, that he'd shaved his head. Ayagriva had quite impressive Allen Ginsberg-ish hair, Allen Ginsberg-esque hair. Anyway, it's quite a lot of hair, like Allen Ginsberg. And he shaved his head, but he kept his beard. So Prabhupada said he looked just like a Muslim. Now, let me think. I had other paraphernalia in mind here. Maybe that starts me off, and if you would like to ask some questions or add something. Yes?
Yes, Hare Krishna. I just was wondering about the disposition that Srila Prabhupada displayed. Was he a type of person that spoke a lot? I mean, if he was not,
What sort of disposition did Srila Prabhupada have? Was he the kind of person who spoke a lot?
or, I mean, when not holding court or lecture?
The word I would use was grave. Is grave. Prabhupada was serious. One time he said, as Swami, you should be serious. There's some picture, Prabhupada liked the serious. Swami should be serious. So Prabhupada was grave. He wasn't chatty. He wasn't chatty. And he wasn't giggly. There was some guru of the day who was all giggly. But Prabhupada was grave. He wasn't giggly, but jolly. Prabhupada said the first sign of a self-realized person is he's jolly. Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. So he was joyful, but at the same time grave. So he spoke when he had something to say, but he didn't talk on and on. But he could be witty, he could be humorous, he could be cutting. He could really, that's one of the duties of the spiritual masters, to cut down the false pride of the disciple. But overall, the word I would use was grave, although temper that with friendly, jolly, humorous upon occasion, biting when he wanted to be. So there were multiple dispositions. He wasn't just always the same according to the circumstance. He could be pleased, displeased. Is that okay? Just that?
Thank you.
Yes.
Marge, I have three questions. The first one is about the manuscripts. You mentioned they were there. Just were they typed
Yes.
already, manuscripts? Any of them
That's what I
handwritten?
remember. Typed rather than, there were manuscripts that were handwritten. Prabhupada wrote the first 6 chapters of Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, and I remember that they were in longhand. In fact, there were 2 versions which we managed to merge in when we did the book, and at least one of them was longhand. Satsrup Maharaj also told me that unusually for his books, Prabhupada dictated nectar of instruction, and Satsrup Maharaj wrote it down longhand. That would have been exceptional, but no, that's what he told me.
Otherwise, they were all typed on those.
Yeah, when
Typewriter.
Prabhupada dictated, then they would be typed. There was a process.
Second question, Marge, you mentioned that Srila Prabhupada had mustard oil and sandalwood oil and had his massage. So I was just wondering, when he was here, he was also having daily massage?
Yeah, I think Sundar Prabhu, as I remember, would have been giving Prabhupada massage.
Okay.
So that was definitely part of Prabhupada's routine.
And the last question is around the original copies of the Bhagavatam that Prabhupada brought with him. So I think...
Most important item of paraphernalia.
Yeah. I was just hearing recently, or reading in Lilamrita, Satsrup Maharaj says there were 200 copies that Prabhupada brought with him. So you came in 68. I'm just wondering, were any of those copies still around?
Yeah, sure, they were for sale. Where the prasadam trays are set up now, there were bookshelves consisting of slats of wood on brackets, and on those bookshelves there were copies of the original pale green covered Easy Journey to Other Planets. There were copies of Srimad Bhagavatam, all 3 first canto volumes. There were copies of some pamphlets. We had 2 or 3 pamphlets, Who is Crazy, Introduction to Gita Upanishad, and on chanting Hare Krishna. There was an ISKCON prospectus, a simple folder, as I recall, ISKCON prospectus. There were a couple of copies of Swami Banmaraj's first volume of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. There were copies of a book by one of Prabhupada's godbrothers whom he liked. I've forgotten the name of the book.
Is it OBL Kapoor?
No, not Obiel Kapoor. And not Professor Sanyal, and not Srila Sridhar Maharaj. It was a small book, not a very big book, about Chaitanya philosophy. There were a couple copies of that, but those books didn't get a whole lot of attention. Books that got more, of course, who was it? Franklin and Marshall, our late academic friend, who'd been studying, one of the few scholars of Gaudiya Vaishnavism at that time.
Thomas Hopkins? No.
Tom Hopkins, yes. Thank you. He remarked that he came here to the storefront and he had some questions about various, naturally as a scholar, the books that the devotees, he assumed, must be reading. And devotees didn't really know anything about them. Chaitanya Charitamrita, yeah, is that a cookbook? Bhagavatam, yeah, I think we have some copies here. They were really sort of not in the focus of anyone's attention. But then when he came back sometime later, maybe a year later or so, the devotees had been reading Srimad Bhagavatam and they were quite far ahead of where he'd found them before. In any case, yes, the Bhagavatams were easily available on the shelves, and one could purchase. I did purchase, in fact, all 3 copies, but I couldn't tell you now where they've gone. Interestingly, I did, as a brahmachari, I also had a copy of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. That copy showed up at the office of the Bhaktivedanta Institute in Gainesville. I was just going through some books there, and there was Teachings of Lord Chaitanya with my name signed on it. I was happy that it's somewhere. The other books may be somewhere too, but I don't know where. There was also Back to Godhead, early copies of Back to Godhead that were available there. Yes. Yes.
My understanding is that the nectar of instruction was recorded by Srila Prabhupada when he was in Mayapur after he met Rishikeshananda again. And
Well,
that
first
would have
thing
been
is
in
it wasn't
Delhi,
it wasn't recorded, as I mentioned. It was dictated to Satsrup Maharaj.
dictated to Satsaru Maharaj.
And yes, I remember that Rishikeshananda was involved in that.
Right. It was like 7 years after whatever beach it was in, Stinson Beach.
Hmm?
It was like 5 or 6 years after Stinson Beach, where Prabhupada met Rishikesh Ananda, till he joined back
I
with
don't
Prabhupada
remember
again.
when Prabhupada wrote Nectar of Instruction. It was fairly late, actually, compared to books like Nectar of Devotion, Krishna Book, TLC, Nectar of Devotion, Upanishad. All those books came before first canto, second canto, third canto. So you'd have to look at the copyright notice to see what year.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Maybe we're done.
Okay. Okay, His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj ki
Jai,
jai.
jai, jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. Gaur
Thank you very much.
Premanande.
Haribol. I just kind of want to point out one very small thing, an illustration of Krishna consciousness. You know, Maharaj comes here, and he has this list prepared of what he's going to talk about, and it's not there. I would be destroyed. I would be like, can we do this another time? He's just like, okay, I'll have to do it without the list. And he proceeds to give a wonderful class about Prabhupada's paraphernalia. Thank you very much. So we'll have kirtan now, and that will be followed by prasadam. Mahaprabhu, would you care to lead kirtan here?
Sure. You like?
Come on up.
For the rare souls who don't have a copy of this book, we have a few copies, so they're available.
All right, that's Srila Prabhupada's Kirtan Standards, which is, I made an allusion at the beginning, introduction, that Maharaj is trying to keep Prabhupada's teachings as they were, so he just sort of goes through how Kirtan has evolved since Prabhupada's disappearance, and not exactly always for the better. And this, in a very sort of even-handed way, just sort of like, this is what Srila Prabhupada did, you know? You do what you want, but this is what Srila Prabhupada did, and this is what Srila Prabhupada said about it. So it's a worthwhile handbook to have.
If only for Madhava Prabhu's introduction, it's worthwhile. His forward, fantastic forward.
Excellent. So get one of those if you can.
1975.
Nectar of Instruction, yeah.
Wow.
So,
You want to be done now, or harmonium?